Hey guys, for this video today, I will be doing a mix of a rant and some personal opinion as well. And for this video today, I'm going to be doing a rant on this past 2017-18 NHL season's Canadian playoff TV schedule. Now, I will explain throughout this video why I'm doing this rant. And I know it's July 31st, I know this video is late, and I know that you could easily argue that I could be basically crying over spilt milk. Because it's something that already happened, eh? But I thought that this would be a good idea for a video because I want to get it off my chest, but the truth is I also want to talk about my feelings on the decision to keep Bob Cole out of the TV playoff broadcasting booth. And because in my opinion, I did not feel that it was right, and I also did not like the way that all of a sudden, out of nowhere, bam, he's not doing playoff games any longer. But I will talk about the Bob Cole situation later on in this video. I want to talk about this past 2017-18 NHL season's playoff schedule. And for me, it wasn't the second, third round or the Stanley Cup final that I had issue with. What I had an issue with was during the first round of the playoffs. Now, this past season, we got to have us folks here in Canada had the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Winnipeg Jets in the playoffs this year. And in the first round, Toronto played Boston, while Winnipeg played Minnesota. Now, Toronto's series was televised on CBC, which I believe that as of this video, it is still a free channel here in Canada that everybody has, even with a basic TV package. It comes with CBC automatically. And if it is not a free channel anymore, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I would appreciate it to know that it's actually a paid channel now, if it actually is, which I don't think it is. I think it's still a free channel, and I do believe it's still taxpayer funded. But if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me on that. I would appreciate it. But now to the Winnipeg-Minnesota series. Now that series was actually scheduled on, or televised on, Rogers Sportsnet. Now for you non-Canadian viewers watching this, you might be thinking, well, what the hell's the big deal? Both series were televised, right? Well, actually, yes, you are right. They were both televised, and that is a good thing. But I am now going to explain why I thought there was a problem and why I'm ranting on this, because I know this is an old news story, but I wanted to do a video about it also for a couple reasons. Number one, it's something that really bothered me when it happened. Also, the situation with Bob Cole, I did not like that either. And the other thing is, with the fact that my last video in the past 2 months has only been uploaded in the past week, I really wanted to give you guys another extra video to watch while I do start to get to work on a lot of major NHL videos that I really want to do. And when I say a lot, there's at least a dozen. I'm not kidding. On top of that, I will talk about the next video that I plan to upload here, or the next 2 videos I plan to upload on here over the next week or so as of this video, and I will do that at the end of the video. But I wanted to post this video up here today because I wanted to give you guys a chance to have an extra video to watch, and I really wanted to do a video on this, and I've been meaning to do it for a while, but I just haven't had the time to do it, and there's other stuff that I've wanted to get through first. But I figured it's better to do it now than never, and I'd rather do it now before it's like months and months and months after the playoffs have ended. But Anyways, back to what I was saying. The problem that I had with Winnipeg and Minnesota on Rogers Sportsnet for the playoffs of the first round of the playoffs was because for Rogers Sportsnet and for TSN, Canada's two major sports channels, you have to pay for those channels through sports packages, which you purchase through your TV provider, which in Canada, the main ones are Shaw, TELUS, Rogers, and Bell, if I'm not mistaken. There might be another one. I think there's also one in Quebec as well, and I might be missing one. But those I know are the four of the major ones: Rogers, Bell, Shaw, and TELUS. And for any major Canadian TV provider, you have to pay for the sports package in order to get Sportsnet or TSN here in Canada. And I say here in Canada because I live in Canada. But anyways, for me, the reason I had an issue with it is because for Winnipeg Jets fans, or for anybody who wanted to watch the Jets Wild series, in order to get that series, you have to pay for that channel or for the sports packages in order to get Sportsnet in order to watch the Jets games during the first round. Thankfully, after the Jets made it to the second round, they actually had all of their games all the way up to the Western Conference Final, where they ultimately lost to the Vegas Golden Knights. They had the second and third round on CBC. They were on CBC after the first round, which was really, really good. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because I'm going to say this. Now, you might be thinking, well, what if they're on the same night and all that? Absolutely. Like in the case of Toronto and Boston, I agree with their decision to put them on CBC. Toronto has a much bigger population, and I'm positive that they have a much bigger fan base than the Winnipeg Jets. So I don't blame Rogers for wanting the bigger market on the free channel. I think that is fair. Absolutely, I think it's fair. But here's the issue that I have with it. Not only that the Jets series was on Sportsnet, which you have to pay for, just like you have to pay for TSN as well here in Canada, because those are the two major sports networks here, eh? But the thing is, with Sportsnet, if the Jets and the Wilds series was on the same nights as Toronto, during the same time slots as Toronto's series against Boston, them being on Sportsnet makes sense. But here's why I have an issue with it. Not just the fact that it's a paid channel and that you have to pay for that channel in order to get it. I mean, with CBC, if you pay for cable, you have to pay in order to get CBC anyway. You can argue that, and that's absolutely correct. But what I'm saying is, with CBC, if you've got just a regular TV package here in Canada, for the most part, I think it comes with basic channel packages automatically. So yes, technically you're paying for your channels, but CBC is considered a free channel as far as I know. As of 2018, I think it's still considered a free channel nationwide here in Canada. But the thing with CBC is it's not part of a sports package that you have to pay for. It comes with your basic TV channels if you get if you sign up for a TV service from a major TV provider, whether it's cable or satellite. But the thing with the Jets and the Wild series was that if it was on the exact same nights as the Bruins Maple Leafs games were, and during the same time slots, which basically their games are starting at around 5 or 6 o'clock on average Pacific time, 8 or 9 Eastern time on average. But if both those series were on, like say, both on a Monday night, having the Jets in Minnesota on Sportsnet, absolutely. That makes sense. I would not be complaining in that sense because it makes sense. But the reason I am ranting about it in this video here today is because I know for a fact that during the first round of this past season's playoffs, Toronto and Winnipeg series were both on alternating nights. Where if Winnipeg was on, if their games were on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, Toronto and Boston's games would be on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. They were on alternating nights. They did not play on the exact same nights. And that is the reason why I felt that the Jets should have also been on CBC during the first round as well. I mean, I don't blame Sportsnet for wanting the Pittsburgh-Philadelphia series on CBC during the first round because Pittsburgh was back-to-back Stanley Cup champions, and a lot of people want to watch the Penguins for Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. That is understandable in my opinion. But for the other series, the Golden Knights and Kings, I mean, if you could have those two series on CBC, why could you not have had the Jets and Wild on CBC? I mean, I know it's up to Sportsnet because they have the national TV rights for NHL hockey here in Canada for the next at least another 9 or 10 years as far as I know. But the thing is, you know, if they could have the Flyers and Penguins and the Kings and the Golden Knights during the first round on CBC, why could they not have had the Jets Wild series on CBC instead of one of those two series? At least in my personal opinion. I mean, at the same time, I could also see them wanting to have higher ratings on both CBC and Sportsnet as well. I mean, that's fair. But I don't agree with it myself because I think that during the playoffs, if Canadian teams are in it, they should be on CBC as much as possible. I think they should be on the national channel that most people or anybody with a TV package has. In my personal opinion, I think that's fair. For the American teams, I mean, as much as I think it's unfortunate, I mean, I'd rather people have to pay for All-American series like the Golden Knights and the Kings during this past postseason over having to pay for a sports package in order to get the Jets and the Wild during the first round. I just feel that the Canadian teams should always be televised on CBC unless it's absolutely necessary to put them on Sportsnet or in past years TSN. Because I know there were some series that were televised on TSN that had Canadian teams during the playoffs when they had the TV contract here in Canada before Sportsnet purchased the national TV rights. But you know, for me, I just felt that the Jets Wild series, especially when their games were on alternating nights from Toronto and Boston series, should have been on CBC as well. I mean, I'm glad that they put the Jets on CBC after the first round. But the thing is, if Toronto did make it to the second round, I mean, I'd hope that they would have had both series on CBC, but I don't know for sure. In my opinion, I think it is possible that maybe the Winnipeg series in the second round against Nashville might have been entirely on Sportsnet if Toronto did make the second round. And I think that would have been unfortunate. If they were both on the same nights, then that's different. That's an exception. But, you know, I mean, I'm glad that Winnipeg was on CBC for the second and third rounds. And speaking of the Golden Knights, I can't believe they made it to the Stanley Cup final in their first year. If that isn't something to be proud of, I don't know what is. To you Golden Knight fans out there, in my opinion, you guys should be proud of your team. The fact they got that close in their first season is absolutely incredible. And I also want to congratulate all of you Washington Capitals fans out there for finally getting to see your team win the Cup. Washington's been in the NHL for over 40 years, and in my opinion, Alexander Ovechkin was the best player in the NHL as of right now, that as of 2018, that has not won the Cup yet. So, seeing Ovechkin win the Cup, I was very happy for both him and the Washington Capitals, and of course, all of their Capitals fans far and wide. And I also would have been happy with the Golden Knights winning the Cup because that would have been one hell of a story as well. But you know, seeing Washington win their first Cup after all these years, I was very, very happy for all of their fans. And also for Alexander Ovechkin because, in my opinion, up until he just won back last month in June, as of this video, I felt that he was the best player in the NHL without a Stanley Cup ring, so I'm very happy for him. But yeah, you know, my issue with the whole CBC Sportsnet playoff TV schedule here in Canada was that the Winnipeg Minnesota series and the Toronto Boston series were both on alternating nights, and they had the Jets on Sportsnet when, in my opinion, they should have been on CBC since they're a Canadian team as well. And I did not agree with that decision. I thought it was unfortunate, and I do hope that next year moving forward they'll do it a little differently and have as many teams on CBC that are Canadian as possible, at least in my opinion. If you disagree with me on that, I totally understand. I don't expect you all to agree with me on that at all. Now, the next thing I want to move on to is talking about long time broadcaster, hockey TV broadcaster Bob Cole. I did not like the fact that he did not even get to commentate one single series in the entire postseason this year. I mean, I understand that he's now basically in his mid-80s. He's getting old. And I know there's a lot of people out there that feel it's time for Bob Cole to retire. And I know there's a lot of people out there, from what I've read on the internet and on comment sections all over the place, that they don't care for Bob Cole as much as maybe they used to 10 years ago even. And that's fine. I don't expect everyone to agree with me on this, but I needed a sip of water, sorry. But for me, I still think that Bob Cole is a really good play-by-play guy. I think he's a really good commentator. Now, everybody makes mistakes, and I can understand where people are coming from with Bob Cole. But for me, I just feel that the way he was left out, just after all these years, all of a sudden, bam, Bob Cole is not broadcasting any more postseason games. I thought that was really unfortunate. And, the fact that Bob Cole did not commentate any playoff games this year, I thought was really disappointing. Throughout my entire life, Bob Cole has called so many major games. Stanley Cup Finals. I've seen so many different playoff series throughout my childhood that were commentated by Bob Cole. Stanley Cup Finals, Winter Olympics, you name it. Bob Cole has covered some of the most iconic hockey games of all time. And Bob Cole's been broadcasting for at least 40 years. I think much longer than that, more around 50 years if I'm not mistaken. And, all of a sudden, after all of these years, to have Bob Cole not commentating a single playoff game, I thought was a mistake. I mean, I understand why. I mean, I can understand that maybe, yeah, he is getting old, but, as long as he still wants to commentate, I think he should be able to commentate. I mean, I honestly don't really know why Bob Cole was left out in the first place. I mean, maybe it was his decision, but I don't think it was. And in my opinion, I think he should be commentating games until either he can't anymore or he just doesn't want to. And for me, after all these decades of hockey commentating and commentating some of the most iconic games of all time, that man should be allowed to go out on his own terms. He shouldn't just all of a sudden not be commentating games anymore. I think he's been doing it for so long that he should be allowed to go out on his own terms. I mean, I don't even know why he didn't commentate a single playoff series this year, to be honest, but in my opinion, if it was Sportsnet and Rogers that decided that Bob Cole was not going to commentate any games this past postseason, I think that they need to reconsider it and let the guy broadcast until he doesn't want to or he can't anymore, or he's too old to do so. I mean, the fact that that guy's in his mid-80s and he's still commentating games up to now is absolutely unbelievable. The fact that after all these decades he's still going, I mean, that's incredible. I mean, a man in his mid-80s still willing to travel from place to place to cover games all season long, I mean, that's commendable. That's amazing. And if he wants to still cover games, they should damn well let him do it and let him go out on his own terms. The fact that they decided to leave Bob Cole out of it, actually, now I remember, I know that he was left out of the playoff schedule, and I do think he did want to still cover games, even though Sportsnet or Rogers decided not to have him broadcast any or commentate any playoff games this past season, which is a shame in my opinion. But you know what? Now I remember. It took me a little while to remember, but now I remember that Bob Cole did want to cover games and that he didn't want to be left out, and I don't blame him. After all these decades, I mean, I know how some people feel about Bob Cole. I know a lot of people feel that way about Bob Cole, that he's old and maybe it's time for him to pass the torch. I get where people are coming from, and I understand that not everyone's going to agree with me here, but Bob Cole is my favorite play-by-play guy. He is my favorite. And you know what? I mean, I can understand where people are coming from. I don't expect all of you watching this video to agree with me. I expect people to disagree with me, but I just feel that after all these years of him doing broadcasting and play-by-play announcing for the NHL for so long and on CBC and Sportsnet, and now Sportsnet, I just feel that he should be allowed to go out on his own terms, and I really do hope that him and Rogers Sportsnet can come together and find a solution. I really do, because, you know, if Bob Cole's not going to cover playoff games anymore, it should be his decision. It should be up to Bob Cole after all these years, because I think he deserves the right to go out on his terms. I mean, I don't expect you all to agree with me on that, but, you know, I just feel that Bob Cole should still be allowed to cover as playoff games until he doesn't want to cover games or he cannot cover them anymore. And, you know, the fact that he was left out of the playoffs, in my opinion, sucks. Sucks. And, you know, I really hope that, you know, if he's not going to cover playoff games anymore, it's because he doesn't want to do them anymore, not because Sportsnet's decided to leave him out of the playoffs. And I just hope they can figure this out, because hopefully Bob Cole, you know, for me personally, I just would be happy to see him cover one series in the first round. They don't even have to have him cover any of the second round series or later on throughout the playoffs up to the Stanley Cup final. I'd just be happy to see him cover one playoff series in the first round. I mean, to still let the guy commentate is what I think is the right thing to do. And if you disagree with me on that, guys, I totally understand. I do not expect you all to agree with me on it at all. Period. But, you know, seeing this situation, it also kind of reminded me of the whole situation that happened when Rogers Sportsnet first started having the national NHL TV contract here in Canada a few years ago, where when they first took over, they put Ron MacLean on Sundays to host hometown hockey and replaced him on Hockey Night in Canada with George Stroumboulopoulos. Now, in my opinion, I think that George Stroumboulopoulos is a good TV host. In fact, I used to watch his talk shows on CBC during my teenage years, during high school, and a lot of times, there were multiple times where I'd watch his show with my grandma, and, you know, his talk show had some pretty interesting things on it from time to time, and I really enjoyed watching his talk show at once in a while I was still in high school. And you know what? I think he's a fantastic talk show host, in my opinion. Or when it comes to music and stuff, I really do like him as a talk show host. But for him to replace Ron MacLean, in my opinion, it just wasn't right. Ron MacLean is an icon here in Canada, and not only that, he is so knowledgeable in hockey. And you know what? I tip my hat to George Stroumboulopoulos for trying, but it's just, he's not Ron MacLean. I mean, to replace Ron MacLean, you can't just have anybody replace him. You need to have someone who really thoroughly understands the roots of hockey itself. And you know what? I think that the way that they just all of a sudden bam George Stroumboulopoulos on Hockey Night in Canada, in my opinion, was a mistake. I mean, I actually think that if he was the host of Hometown Hockey and Ron MacLean never left Hockey Night in Canada in the first place, I think that there is a chance that that could have actually worked out. Even though George Stroumboulopoulos is not Ron MacLean, I'm sure that him hosting Hometown Hockey on Sundays would have probably been okay. I'm sure he would have done fine. And in my opinion, if they would have just left Ron MacLean on Hockey Night in Canada, I actually believe there is a chance that George Stroumboulopoulos could still be a TV host for Hometown Hockey to this day. In my personal opinion. But, you know, even when Rogers Sportsnet first took over, you know, I did not like that Ron MacLean was replaced with George Stroumboulopoulos. I mean, if they were going to get another host and George Stroumboulopoulos was their choice, I think he should have hosted Hometown Hockey. If he did that, I think he would have been okay. I mean, I'm sure some of you will disagree with me on that too, and I totally understand, but at least there, he's not hosting the main show that everybody who is a hockey fan that's able to sit down and watch hockey on a Saturday is going to sit down and watch. That way he would have not been on the main show. He would have been doing something else. He would have been on the Sundays where a lot less people where it's a lot less likely to have huge television audiences at the level that Hockey Night in Canada always draws. And you know, it's just the way that started, in my opinion, the decision to put Stroumboulopoulos on Hockey Night in Canada, in my opinion, was a mistake. And I say that as someone who thinks that Stroumboulopoulos is a really good TV talk show host. I like him as a TV talk show host. But for Hockey Night in Canada, in my opinion, he was just the piece of the puzzle that did not fit, in my personal opinion. And on top of that as well, I also did not like how they got rid of things like After Hours, and I believe the second intermission show, Satellite Hot Stove, was also replaced for a short time as well. And I think it's a shame that they did that, because I used to always, growing up my entire life as a hockey fan, I've always enjoyed After Hours. Growing up, I used to always watch it after the late games on CBC. And I was so happy that they brought it back this past season, and I hope it never goes anywhere ever again, because in my opinion, that was also a huge mistake. But anyways, you know, I just thought I'd do this video because I felt that the Winnipeg-Minnesota series, with it being on alternating nights from Toronto and Boston series in the first round this past postseason, that they should have also been on CBC. And in my opinion, I also felt that Bob Cole should have at least got to cover one playoff series in the first round. I honestly feel that I did not like the decision to leave him out of the playoffs this year. He's my favorite commentator, and I know a lot of you may disagree with me on that, and I totally understand. And to me, I don't blame you guys for feeling that way. I know he's getting old, but to me, I still think he's great. Maybe not as good as he used to be. You know, that's what happens when you get older. You can't, a lot of times, even with athletes too, sometimes it's harder to do the thing you've been doing for so long. It's just a part of getting older, unfortunately. I mean, I know there's a huge difference between doing play-by-play announcing and playing a sport like hockey professionally, eh? But over the years, you know, you're not the same. But I still think Bob Cole's more than good enough to be at least able to cover one series in the first round of the playoffs every year, in my opinion. And on top of that, I also figured that I'd touch base on some of the stuff over the past few years that CBC has done as well, or I mean Rogers Sportsnet has done as well, like ultimately replacing Ron MacLean on Hockey Night in Canada with George Stroumboulopoulos. That was a mistake in my opinion. And on top of that, getting rid of little things that made Hockey Night in Canada great and continue to make them great now, thankfully, which is shows like After Hours and the second intermission, Hot Stove Tonight, or Satellite Hot Stove like it used to be called. Shows like that make Hockey Night in Canada even better in my opinion. So I'm glad those are back. But I just hope that this whole situation with Bob Cole gets fixed, because if he's not going to commentate playoff games anymore, I think it should be on his terms. After all these decades of being such a great play-by-play guy, in my opinion, I think he deserves to go out on his own terms. But anyways, you guys, with that, I'm going to call it a wrap. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and as always, you guys, until next time, take care, and of course, as always, you guys, bye for now.